Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Church of Christ, and I'm a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Quest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today, we're on day 127, and we're doing Christus Dominus 15 on bishops called to sanctify their flock, right? Sanctification, one of the three missions of, govern, teach, and sanctify, right? If you want to follow on, there's more details and a reading plan at sqpn.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we talked about the need to make good catechesis happen and adapt to how we teach doctrine to times and places. Today, we're still on chapter 2 on bishops in their particular churches, still on 2.1, diocesan bishops. Now we're going to talk about bishops leading the people of God in holiness by their example, their encouragement, and leading the liturgy and these sacraments, right? So that's how we do this. This one of the three duties of priests and bishops particularly has to do with the sacraments. That's why we end with the sacraments there. So let's read this. Paragraph 15 has 3 subparagraphs. We're going to A, B, and C. A is on bishops holding the fullness of orders to regulate the liturgy and the fullness. So we're going to start with the liturgy. And then we're going to talk about the liturgy in B, which is really about working so the faithful know and love the Eucharist. And then C is about other ways of holiness, right? So we need holy priests, we need holy lay people, we need holy religious, and the bishop needs to encourage that, both in his encouragement and he needs to model that. So let's read 15a. In exercising their office of sanctifying, bishops should be mindful that they have been taken from among men and appointed their representative before God, in order to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. Bishops enjoy the fullness of the sacrament of orders, and both presbyters and deacons are dependent upon them in their exercise of their authority. For the presbyters are the prudent fellow workers of the episcopal order, and are themselves consecrated as true priests of the New Testament, just as deacons are ordained for the ministry and serve the people of God in communion with the bishop and his presbytery. Therefore, bishops are the principal dispensers of the mysteries of God, as well as being the governors, promoters, and guardians of the entire liturgical life in the church committed to them. So before we analyze it, 2 terms, right? So presbyter here refers to priests in the second order of the sacrament of orders. So you have deacons, presbyters, and bishops here. Again, presbyteros is just the Greek word for elder or priest, and that gets transferred into presbyter in English. The linguistics guys might be like, oh, I know exactly how that changes happens. If you want to share that in the comments, go ahead. So, then the other thing is the mysteries, right? They're the dispensers of the mystery of God. What do we mean by mysteries here? The word mysteries is the same word it is used for sacrament. So this is talking about, and that's why it says the mysteries of God and follows up the liturgy. The mysteries, talking about the 7 mysteries, is the same as the 7 sacraments. Just different, slightly different terminology, more common in the Eastern Church, but the same basic idea. So let's analyze it. The bishops are not some special class, right? I've known priests who later became bishops. They were just ordinary priests, right? It's not like a lot of the other priesthoods, even the Aaronic priests in the Old Testament and tons of the pagan priesthoods, they were based on family line, right? So you had to be a descendant of so-and-so, and like maybe even the first male descendant of them to be the high priest. But no, in Christianity, bishops are chosen from among men, chosen from among pretty ordinary priests, right? And that should lead to humility for bishops. Bishops need to be humble in that, right? And they have the fullness of orders, right? We have those 3 levels of orders. They have the fullness. Most of us who are priests have the second, well, all of us who are priests have the second order, which is the most common to stop at. And then some have the first order alone, which is deacons, which is more common than bishops, but not as common as priests, right? And then it mentions that the priests were the priests like the New Testament, priests of Jesus, right? Letter to the Hebrews, not quoted here, but that's a reference in the New Testament. And the deacons too are truly ordained, right? And finally, the bishops are principal dispensers of the sacraments. They govern the liturgy as well. So the bishop can make certain determinations about the liturgy for the local church. Maybe some saint becomes mandatory there, or even up to a solemnity and things like that. Those are types of things that a local bishop can make those decisions. So let's move on to 15b. Bishops working so the faithful know and love the Eucharist and the Bible in a way, but I think we just said the Eucharist in the above. But let's read the text. They should, therefore, constantly exhort themselves to have the faithful know and live the Paschal mystery more deeply through the Eucharist, and thus become a firmly knit body in the unity of the charity of Christ. attent upon prayer and the ministry of the word, Acts chapter 6, they should devote their labor to this end, that all those committed to their care may be of one mind in prayer, and through the reception of the sacraments may grow in grace and be faithful witnesses to the Lord. Right? So this is what we have. This is this idea, right? The Eucharist is source and summit of the Christian life, right? Which we already talked about in Sacrosanctum Concilium. It talks about Jesus' real presence. The bishops have a duty to foster this. The Eucharist is going to bind us together as Christians because we're united in charity through the Eucharist, right? That is the central aspect of Christian life. Jesus is present. Jesus is fully present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, right? And then also, it should also be ministry of the word, right? Prayer, right? We need to devote themselves to prayer, devote themselves to the liturgy of the word. Love all the sacraments, not just the Eucharist, right? And so the bishop should encourage that, and he should demonstrate that in his own life. Because bishops are not just here as like this kind of CEO who tells other people what to do. No, they are the ones going forward as encouraging others, right? So let's move to 15c, our last subparagraph today, on bishops leading others in holiness. And so let's go to the text. As those who lead others to perfection, bishops should be diligent in fostering holiness among their clerics, religious and laity, according to the special vocation of each. They should also be mindful of their obligation to give an example of holiness and charity, humility, and simplicity of life. Let them so hallow the churches and trust to them that the feeling of the universal church of Christ may shine forth fully in them. For that reason, they should foster priestly and religious vocations as much as possible and should take a special interest in missionary vocations. Right, so here we have it. The bishops need to lead us in holiness, right? This idea of encouragement, which we talked about in the last paragraph. And not just, hey, you should be holy. No, I am going to demonstrate holiness, right? The pastor too should do that as a priest, right? The pastor should demonstrate holiness. Now, he's not necessarily going to be the holiest person in the parish, but he should strive to be and be that example, right? And the bishop should lead all different vocations of holiness, right? Clergy, so bishops, priests, and deacons, auxiliary bishops in this case, I assume, as opposed to diocesan bishops, right? Religious, so those who made vows, and then laity. Laity are simply those who have neither received ordination to diaconate or above, or made religious vows. And so most of you, right? And then it needs to foster vocations. So the church needs so many vocations, so many different forms of life. We in the Legion need vocations, the diocese needs vocations, the Temple of Sisters need vocations, the sisters who are teaching need vocations, the sisters who are serving the poor need vocations. All of these different vocations are needed for the church, right? And one of the ones it mentions is the missions too. Have vocations who go forth in mission, right? And this part is by their example. Part of how they go forth in this is by their example. So that seems to work. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we are going to continue with the next paragraph of Christus Dominus, which is 16, on the governing role of bishops, right? So we've talked about the teaching, then the sanctifying. Now we're going to talk about the governing, the three roles, right? Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like playlists and for individual documents and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook or X.
Amen.